Hello, everyone. Great to be here in Inuvik with MP Michael McLeod and Duane Smith. Great to take your questions.
Hello, Eric Bowling, Northern News Services, Inuvik. Minister Blair was here a few weeks back, and one of the things he emphasized was that Northern defense spending is infrastructure spending. And then he spoke to our mayor, Clarence Wood, and told him that the new area could definitely support a larger military installation. So I'm wondering, is there a larger military installation in the works?
Well, Minister Blair made it very clear that this government knows that investing in northern sovereignty means investing in defense, but mostly investing in the people who live here, who've lived here forever. So making sure that as we build up infrastructure, we're building things that are multiple uses, helping get supplies in, helping get commercial connections. These are the kinds of things that we're looking at. So we're going to continue to work with municipal officials, continue to work with provincial and territorial leaders to be investing in the kinds of infrastructure that's going to make the difference for the North for decades to come.
Hi, Lisa Johnson from the Canadian Press. The NDP put forward a private member's bill last week aiming to criminalize residential school denialism. This likely won't go anywhere unless the government takes it on. Will your Liberal government support this bill?
We will look very carefully at this bill. Obviously, anytime people are putting limits on free speech, a free and democratic society needs to take careful steps. We were the government that criminalized Holocaust denial over the past number of years, so we're certainly going to make sure that Canada continues to move forward on reconciliation. Part of that is recognizing what happened with residential schools. Quite frankly, what we're seeing over the past years is more and more Canadians becoming aware of Canada's history, of understanding the work that we all have to do around reconciliation. We see school kids wearing orange. We see media outlets devoting this entire day to celebrating Indigenous cultures and celebrating Indigenous traditions. Canadians are understanding that recognizing truth and reconciliation isn't about feeling guilty or bad about Canada. It's about committing every day to a better Canada and understanding that for us to be the country we all want to be, we need to work hard at reconciliation. So we're going to take any proposals by any political party seriously when it comes to advancing reconciliation and making sure that Canadians understand how important it is.
Emily Blake, Cabin Radio. I'm curious how this agreement is going to look on the ground and what kind of changes it's going to make.
First of all, and I'll turn to Duane for a follow-up on this. The focus that the Inuvialuit Regional Corporation took on this is really about prevention, understanding that the best thing for kids at risk is to make sure that they don't get at risk, and that means community support services, addiction services, housing investments, the kinds of things that are going to keep kids safe and you never have to get to the point of removing them. At the same time, we know some kids will be in extremely difficult situations, and what this agreement means is that the government of the Northwest Territories will work closer with IRC to make sure that there is proper, appropriate supports and culturally appropriate conditions for kids who need to be protected. But I'm happy to turn to Duane to talk about the next steps.
Thank you, and thank you for the question. First of all, we had to get the law drafted. We've got it enacted now. We've just reached an agreement with the federal government and the territorial government for us to do the coordinating implementation of it. Previously, we're appreciative of the federal government allocating some funds to us early so that we could start to build up the capacity. We know we need to have the skills and the training. It's been worked out with both governments in regards to what level of capacity we would need. But now that we have the coordination agreement as well as the fiscal, we can start to enhance the capacity as well as building the infrastructure. So we'll be building our youth wellness centers. The Prime Minister's touched on different programs that already complement how we're trying to alleviate children getting into these situations where We have family life skill programs. We have different programs that are focused on all age groups. And not all of them are always just focused to Inuvialuit. They're provided to others that are in need of that as well. We have an on-the-land facility where it also accommodates families to try to build up that family bonding, the life skills with each other, because that's how it's been broken down with residential schools. Children were separated for years from their parents, and we need, and it's been lost, and you can see that in some of the generations where they haven't been able to properly develop the skills as parenting. And now we have that ability, and we're slowly starting to build up those programs, those services. We also have agreements with the Yukon territory as well as British Columbia and Ontario to share information if we have beneficiaries living within those areas. But we do realize that in some cases it's still in the best interest for that child, depending on their individual situation, that we might not be able to provide the adequate services and attention that they need. They would still be somewhere in the south getting that proper care.
Des Loreen, CBC News. Now, Ningaqsiq has been something that people have wanted in this region for a long time and been talking about that. Could you maybe speak to the importance and significance of the contributions the federal government is making to the Inuvialuit people?
When we first got elected, we made a commitment to reconciliation, and that meant putting the desires and the vision of Indigenous peoples and Indigenous leadership right across the country forward. And what we heard from Inuvialuit, which we heard from communities right across the country, was the importance of protecting kids. We know that so much of the future goes through ensuring that young people have the opportunities, have the sense of identity, of self, of optimism, of pride that comes from language, traditional knowledge, learning from their elders about who they are and where they're going. That's why over the first years in our government, we worked closely with First Nations and Indigenous leaders and Inuit leaders right across the country to develop C-92, which was a bill focused on child and family services that would take kids out of the provincial and territorial systems and ensure that they could stay in their communities, stay in their culture, stay in their languages, even if they couldn't stay at home because they were at risk there. Not removing kids from their languages and cultures was a huge priority because to a certain extent it was a different version of the terrible mistake that Canada had made with residential schools, of removing kids from their language and their culture. So that's why moving forward on child and family services has been so important to us. We've now signed 11 agreements around child and family services. There's still a lot of work to do, and one of the things I'm really pleased with this one is that it did go with an agreement with the government of the Northwest Territories to be partners in this. And that's not something we see across the country. Indeed, there are provincial governments who are fighting the federal government's desire to give back control of kids at risk to communities and to Indigenous nations. That's something there's still work to do. So I'm hoping that this agreement is going to be able to be held up as part of the path forward, and it's something that we are deeply committed to as a government. The most important thing, though, is that we are here to facilitate the leadership by and from the Inuvialuit to be able to determine what the right conditions, what the right steps, what the right process is as this gets developed over the coming years, always putting kids at the center, and this $530 million agreement will ensure just that.
Freelance based in Inuvik. I'm just wondering if you have any updates from March on the 854,000 Inuvialuit burial sites project. If you have any updates, I'd love to hear.
Want to speak to that?
I can try to. Sorry, you were really You were kind of low to me there. I apologize. Can you just repeat some of that?
Sorry. I'm just looking for updates on the $854,000 agreement on the Inuvialuit burial sites project.
Okay.
That came out in March.
Yeah, I'm familiar with it. We're still trying to work on gathering more data, actually, because we have recently been approached by the University of New Mexico as well, with other artifacts that were from our region, as well as from the University of Chicago, that have coincidentally, for some reason, got a hold of some human remains from our coastal communities. So it's an evolving file. If you look behind you, there's some history and knowledge of historical sites of our region as well, where we know artifacts are taken from and stored in proper facilities so that they don't decay any further. But it's an ongoing file and issue with my staff. We are sending a delegation to the University of New Mexico in a few weeks to start to work on repatriating those human remains as well. Thank you.
The reason I turn to Duane first is because as a federal government, we are committed to doing the work of healing and exposing the truth and doing the work that is necessary on residential school burial sites. But the lead is always the community. They get to determine how and where we want to go, and the federal government will be there as partners. We announced more funding in Budget 2024, but the lead needs to be the local community and the elders and the people who've suffered through this history and need to get the closure and the healing that is right for them, and that's what we will always do.
Travis Burke, CBC News. Moving over to the international scene here. What is Canada's response to reports that Israel is preparing for limited ground operations inside Lebanon?
Canada is calling for a ceasefire immediately in Lebanon and indeed across the region. I spoke with the Prime Minister of Lebanon yesterday to impress upon him that Canada stands with the Lebanese people and with everyone in the region who wants to see an end to violence and conflict, see people able to return to their homes. We know how excruciatingly difficult this is for so many people to see the upheavals in the region, and Canada continues to work with partners in the region and around the world to push for a ceasefire. We need to see an end to the violence against civilians.
Could I get that in French as well, please? Thank you.
Le Canada est en train d'appeler sans équivoque pour un cessez-le-feu au Liban. Nous devons de continuer à travailler avec nos partenaires à travers le monde pour protéger les civils, pour mettre fin à la violence. J'ai parlé justement au Premier ministre du Liban hier. Le Canada a des liens profonds avec le Liban. On a des dizaines de milliers de Canadiens qui sont là, mais aussi des milliers de Canadiens qui ont de la famille et des amis au Liban. On est très préoccupés par ce qui se passe et on est en train d'appeler pour un cessez-le-feu et pour une fin à la violence dans la région. Merci tout le monde.